Media, and welcome once again. My name is Pagamile Hlubi Majola. Thank you so much for joining me on this show. We are going to dive into our very first conversation, which really is about the TRC cases inquiry. Now, for those of you who don't know the background to this issue, what is basically happening right now is that there is a commission which is being chaired by the former judge Sisi Kampepe, and the purpose of these TRC cases inquiry, it was really a process which was announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa in May 2025, and the goal of these hearings is to determine whether attempts were made to prevent the investigation and prosecution of apartheid-era crimes. So for those of you who were around during the period of the Truth and Reconciliation hearings that took place in the early 90s in South Africa, you will know that the Truth and Reconciliation hearings were really about trying to find the truth, but also trying to assist us as South Africa to reconcile after the horrors of apartheid. So these hearings were really about getting facts and information from all of the apartheid era generals and policemen about what happened. There were thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people who lost loved ones during that time and didn't have answers to, what happened to their loved ones. They were tortured. There were events where people were tortured, people were killed, people went missing. So really, what these hearings are about are to try and establish whether we've gone far enough in that process. Because unfortunately, if you look at what's happened since that process, there've only been a handful of prosecutions since then. And many, many people still feel genuinely and we can say justifiably aggrieved over the fact that they feel that the TRC hearings didn't go far enough. So I'm now going to introduce my guest. Her name is Dr. Vashna Jagarnath. She happens to be the founding director and CEO of Imfundo Hub, and she's a very well-known and brilliant academic, I might say, and historian who will really be able to help us unpack this issue. Welcome to Salam Media, Dr. Jagarnath.
Oh, thank you, Pagamile. I'm very happy to be here. And also, I wish the listeners of Salam Media happy Ramadan in the next month.
So what I'd like us to do, because I do know that we have an ad break, but before the ad break, and I'm begging my producer to indulge me, I just want us to set the scene here. Can we just talk about this TRC process?
Yes.
Would you say, I mean, I don't know how much of the hearings you've been watching, but what are your thoughts based on what you've seen so far with regards to whether or not political interference derailed the TRC justice process, and whether or not we, what are your thoughts about this process and whether we can expect justice for those who are still aggrieved?
Well, I think that's like a really big question because firstly, we have to think about what is the role of a commission, right? So we've had commissions throughout history in South Africa, and commissions are, they are like basically extrajudicial bodies that are set up for a short period of time to deal with particular issues. And they don't really have that amount of legal, they don't have any legal standing in the real sense, in that they are able to pursue someone when they have a finding. What a commission can only do is make recommendations and hope that there's the political will and the ability for the state to actually continue with legal procedures. And now what's coming out in the inquiry is basically saying, what many of us know about commissions in general is that the commission has been limited. Its work has been limited, and that's through various things. I mean, there's questions around the role of former President Thabo Mbeki and former President Jacob Zuma in issuing pardons and so on. But in general, what you find with commissions is that is usually the case, is that if there isn't the political will, then what commissions usually do is they present and then you have findings that really can either bring together society, illuminate what people have gone through. And then, afterwards, what tends to happen is usually very little in terms of material change.
I'd like you please just to stay with us, Dr. Vashna, so that we can go into an ad break and then we continue with our conversation.
Okay.
Keep it locked on Salam Media.
Listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
For the first time, I can dream again.
The Africa Muslims Agency Orphan Hope Program provides the food, clothing, and basic support needed by thousands of children across the world. Every child deserves a chance at a hopeful future.
For 50,000 rands, you can transform our lives with the AMA Orphan Hope Program.
Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
With Ashraful Aid this Ramadan, your zakat changes lives. It feeds families facing hunger, restores dignity to those in need, and brings hope where it is needed most. From food relief to essential support, your zakah reaches communities with care, transparency, and impact. Give with confidence, give with trust. Make your zakah count this Ramadan. Give your zakah to Ashraful Aid and help change lives today.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
And we are back. You are with Pagamile Majola, who is your host for this morning on Salam Media. I'm going to be guiding you through today's show up until 10 a.m. Please don't hold back. We want to hear from you. Give us a call on our studio line on 011 680 0355. Or you can contact us on WhatsApp on 061 766 0355, or you can tag us on X at Salam Media. The hashtag, of course, is News and Vibes. We want to hear from you. We are just picking up on the conversation that we just started with Dr. Vashna Jagarnath regarding commissions, and particularly this commission on the TRC, which is looking at whether political interference played a role in ensuring that there was real justice for the victims of apartheid. And I think this is a very, very important question to ask Dr. Vashna at this time in South Africa, because part of why we are struggling to move on as a society, particularly as the Black majority, is because many people have described us as the walking wounded, meaning that we still carry with us the deep, painful scars of apartheid. There was no real, genuine restorative justice, not just in terms of direct financial support, but also if you look at the structure of our economy. Black people are still at the tail end of the economy. Some have called it a sanitized version, that this democracy is almost a sanitized version of apartheid. What are your thoughts in relation to because you spoke about, before we went to the ad break, how commissions, for example, have no legal power. So what are we doing here? I mean, are we just wasting time? Because this is a very real and a very serious question. What do you think government's real agenda is here with this process?
So I always, some of what you're speaking to speaks to some of the central criticisms and critiques of the TRC, where it says that it prioritized usually individual acts of violence that were quite spectacular, that, which is really important that we speak about those individual acts of violence. And it was really powerful at the time. I want people to understand that in 1994 and in the 1990s, it was a really powerful moment, and having people confront the perpetrators and the abusers of violence against them was a really powerful moment. I don't want to diminish that at all, like people tend to do today. I think in those moments we didn't really know what was going to unfold in the future. So it's easy now in retrospect to criticize everything and say, oh, it was wrong. But I think even at the time, one of the central critiques of the TRC was the fact that, it deals, while it's dealing with these individual acts or spectacular acts of violence, it's not dealing with the structural violence, the structural everyday violence, the lawful dispossession, which was allowed under apartheid, of people, exploitation, unequal education, the entire racialized labor system that we had. So, it was not dealing with the structure of apartheid, which we still live with today. So often people say what a commission is really good at doing is it's really good at appeasing a sense of moral victory or a moral coming together in society, creating a particular cultural discourse, but it's not really good at implementing material change in society. And I'm often quite skeptical of commissions. If we look back in the history of South Africa, for example, after the 1913 Land Act, there were land commissions that were held. There was one held in 1916, and that was to look at the conditions of what happened after the 1913 Land Act. And a lot of it was around how to expropriate more land. But a lot of the findings of the commission was that people were pushed onto too little bits of land, and that it was detrimental to them. However, that did nothing. It was a commission, people were heard, and thereafter you have far more draconian laws coming into being, eventually culminating in apartheid in the late 1940s. So I think commissions often are a good way to get people to find out things that they want to find out, but it often has had very little power in our society. And I just want to state that since the end of apartheid, we've had close to 20 to 25 commissions in post-apartheid South Africa. And I want us just to think how much of change has actually happened in our society. There was the Marikana Commission, there's the Zondo Commission. How much of that work has actually been followed through, the recommendations and the sort of information that we've gleaned through those commissions, how much of those have actually been acted upon? Has the conditions that miners experience changed in South Africa very much since Marikana?
Well, those are very, very good questions. And I think they are valid questions, because apart from the fact that these commissions are not cheap, these are very, very costly commissions. The Zondo Commission, if I recall, was 1 billion, if not more than 1 billion rand. But besides the cost, there's also the challenge around whether we get what we want from this process. I mean, I was listening a little bit and also just reading some of the commentary on this commission and the articles that I've seen here regarding some of the utterances made by journalist Lucanyo Scalata, who's the son of anti-apartheid activist Fort Scalata, and he
Mm-hmm.
gave quite a powerful testimony earlier in the week at the commission. And one of the things that he did say, which he came across very strongly, was his criticism of the state, of the democratic Black
Mm-hmm.
government, that first and foremost has never even met with the victims of the Craddock Fall. You know, I think that is so sad. They haven't even met with the victims.
Absolutely.
And what I think was also painful for him to talk about, he said, by now, the killers of my father should be in jail.
Yes.
But we haven't even started the process of unpacking who was responsible and what is to be done.
Yeah.
Your thoughts around that?
No, that absolutely what he says captures the nature of a commission. And I think even now, with what Suka is saying, Yasmin Suka, around, the presidents have issued pardons, that there's not been things done, that there's been political interference. I think, yes, there is political interference, but I think we're also missing what a nature of a commission is, that is what ends up happening with a commission. And the fact that people have been left feeling like they have not received justice, individually they've not received justice, and more broadly, South Africans have felt that they have not come into a just society. We have not been able to build a just society. The fact that we are having a commission of inquiry on another commission tells you how little has been done. The fact that we need a commission on the TRC, which was a commission, shows you how little is done. And you have to ask the political question, well, why now? Why now have this query? What is the purpose of it? Because are they going to now go ahead and do what they say that Thabo Mbeki and Jacob Zuma have not done? Is President Ramaphosa going to go ahead and rectify this? I'll find that, given how much his inability to act at any point, we'll find that this will also fall on deaf ears, that we'll hear about it, we'll talk about it, it'll give us content, but it's not going to actually make any changes, whether it's in individual lives of people who have absolutely suffered horrors under the apartheid state, or whether it's ordinary South Africans every day dealing with the repercussions and the structures of apartheid. We will find that very little's been done. And a commission, whenever I hear a commission, I just know it's going to be another sort of spectacle, a spectacle of power, a way to say, well, we're listening, we hear you, but that's all we're going to do.
So with that in mind, if let's say you had the power over this Sisi Kampepe commission, what would be some of the recommendations that you would make around correcting the injustice? Because you have raised a very important issue. It is a travesty that we're having a commission about a commission. That in itself is an admission of failure. What should be some of the practical things that can be done to correct this situation? Dr. Jagarnath, I think we've lost you there. We seem to have a technical problem with our guest. So we're just going to try and rectify that a little bit for you now, if you'll give us a moment. But while we're sorting that out, as I said, we are currently having a conversation with Dr. Jagarnath, and she's back on the line.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard my question, which was around this TRC commission, to say, how do we correct this wrong? Because it's clearly wrong that we are back here again, rehashing something that should have been resolved in 1994, and steps and action should have been taken by the NPA to act on the recommendations of the original TRC commission.
Well, I think if we are really going to take this seriously, it could set the sort of practice of how we move forward with TRCs. And I think if we take this seriously, we reopen all of the various sort of recommendations that were made at the TRC, and the various sort of cases that were taken up, and we actually reopen them and take them seriously and follow through with that. That could be a moment of renewal in South Africa, where people can begin to have faith once again in the fact that the state and the legal system can do something, that it can function, that it can work, that the NPA actually has some teeth to prosecute and do what it needs to do. And actually, that questions of justice are not just used for when it is politically expedient to be used, and that it's actually about justice. And I think that when we think about how to do that, we could do that. We could use this moment right now and take on the recommendations of the inquiry, investigate, understand what had gone wrong, and rectify those in very serious ways, and take forward these cases and make the recommended changes and amendments, and also reparations and all of that needs to be done. We need to do that. But even further than that, what we need to do is we need to then start taking seriously the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. We need to start taking seriously the recommendations of the Marikana Commission, popularly known as the Marikana Commissions, and also even now the Madlanga Commission, which is ongoing as well. What will be the outcomes? What will be the recommendations? And will they be actually implemented? And will we see a change? So for me, I think we have a moment to be able to rethink the role of commissions and use it in the way it's intended, in a very real way, to bring about change in society. Or, unfortunately, I have very little faith that might happen. But if it did, I think that would be the way to go.
And on that note, we want to thank our guest, Dr. Vashna Jagarnath, for joining us on News and Views with Pagamile Hlubi Majola. Thank you so much for your insights on this very, very important topic. And we, of course, will be watching this to see how it all plays out. And on that note, we are going to take a quick break and pay the bills.